IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Monday night, December 23rd. We are 2 days away from having a very Merry Christmas. And we are, what is it now, Trev? 9 days away from Notre Dame going into the quarterfinals and facing the Georgia Bulldogs. We are going to have a lot of previews of that game. You're coming up over the next couple weeks. Tomorrow, Trev and I will do sort of our intro look at the breakdown. We're going to talk about what's at stake for Notre Dame. We'll talk about just some of the early, overview of Georgia. We'll kind of just break the Bulldogs down, and then we will take Christmas off because I'm not going to make this young man have to work on Christmas, nor do I want to have to do a show on Christmas. I'd like to spend some time with my wife on Christmas. But Thursday and Friday, we're going to be back. And we are going to take a deeper dive into the matchups of the offense and defense. And then Saturday, we are going to have our college football playoff preview. It'll be Trevor. It'll be me. It'll be Bill Bender. Going to see if I got to get with Sean Steyer, see what his schedule is like. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do it or not, but we're hoping to have him on it. We're going to preview all 4 playoff games. And then next week, we'll kind of take our final dive into the game, which is on Wednesday. So it's going to be a very interesting, quirky schedule. We're going to have a ton of breakdowns coming up over the next couple of days. But today, we're going to kind of talk about some breaking news. We're going to break down a couple things that happened today. And the first one that we're going to break down is going to be what happened with Rylie Mills and the fact that he's out for the year. So we're going to take a deep dive into what that means for Notre Dame, what comes next, all that stuff. We're going to take a deep dive into that. And then the second part of it is we're going to break down the commitment of Malachi Fields, the transfer wide receiver from the University of Virginia, who a lot of Notre Dame fans watched play this year because he obviously had 4 catches for over 80 yards against Notre Dame in the matchup that they had in November. So we're going to break that down. Big pickup for Notre Dame, Trevor. Real big pickup. So we're going to talk about the backstory for that, break down just all things related to that, Trev. And if you guys have any questions that you want us to address, go ahead and throw in a super chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the show. But otherwise, we're going to get rocking and rolling here, Trev, by really diving into what the bit of news we got today, which was just a real crushing blow for Notre Dame, which is that Rylie Mills is out for the season. We were hopeful that it wouldn't be the case. He was moving around and walking around afterwards, but clearly when they did the tests, there must have been some structural damage that they didn't either want to or couldn't really risk having him play. And so Notre Dame is going to have to now be hopefully they're in final 3 games, hopefully, without the guy that has been arguably their best defensive player for the last 2 months of the season, at least in a big chunk of games. I say overall, he's been their best defensive player outside of Xavier Watts over the last 2 months.
Yeah, it's a tough blow, man. I mean, you wake up today and you're excited, right? Because you kind of come to that realization that, almost kind of that feeling from the weekend is kind of gone now. You start moving into the week, but it's fantastic. Notre Dame's not done. You know what I mean? And they continue to keep rolling. And then you get that news today, which is really, really, really unfortunate. You feel for the young man and it puts it into perspective how quickly, Marcus Freeman always preaches that one play, one life mentality, because you never know which one could be your last play. I think it's kind of poetic that Rylie Mills' last play in a Notre Dame uniform was a sack, So, yeah, but it's tough. It is tough, So, Bryan, we're going to talk a little bit about, what this means, because at the end of the day, Notre Dame does still have a really big quarterfinals matchup coming up against the Georgia Bulldogs on New Year's Day. So looking at this matchup as a whole, Bryan, with the Rylie Mills injury, as unfortunate as it is, and what's this kind of mean? What does this look like for them moving forward?
Well, the big answer is we'll talk about what it could mean, but the big answer is we really don't know. One thing that you and I said coming into the playoff is there's a breaking point, and Bubs in the chat said that, and he's repeating what I said, and I know some people don't like him to say that, but the answer is we said there's going to be a breaking point. There's going to be some injury or injuries that make you say, hey, you're not going to be able to overcome that one. We don't know that this is it for Notre Dame. We don't know that this is the breaking point for Notre Dame, but it's just getting to the point where it's just getting a bit ridiculous. I mean, this is now your 4th defensive lineman that you've lost for the season, 3rd due to injury. You obviously lost Jordan Patelho. You lost Boubacar Traore before the 5th game was over. Jason Onye's having a heck of a start to the season. He's gone, not injury related. And now, you have Rylie Mills. And so what you've lost is going into this Georgia game, and a game where you're going to need your D-line to play at a high level, you've lost your best player. Does that mean Notre Dame's going to lose? No. Does that mean that Notre Dame has no chance? Like somebody said, how big of a mismatch is it now that Notre Dame does? And I'm like, guys, this is a team that rushed for 129 yards a game. You know what I mean? Like what do we like? Let's not. You guys got to stop thinking this is 2021 Georgia. It's not. Does that mean that Georgia's really good? Yeah, they're very good. Can they run on Notre Dame? Possible. But the reality is that Notre Dame still has weapons on defense. This is a team that's not going to go from being what they've been all year to suddenly a bad team because of losing Rylie Mills. It's just another time where somebody's got to step up. And who's that going to be? And we'll dive into those things. But you also can't minimize and act like losing Rylie Mills is like no big deal. They've got 3 Rylie Mills on the depth chart behind them. That's not the case. They don't have anyone like Rylie Mills, and in order to replace him, and we're going to dive into a lot of what's going to need to happen to replace him, is you're losing your stud defensive lineman. And I'm not actually worried about what this means for the run game as much as what it means for your pass rush. I'm more concerned about that. Now, I'm concerned about both, but if I had to say which one am I more concerned about, it's as a pass rusher. But you're losing a heck of a player. There's no question. You're losing your best front 7 player, and your depth is gonna be truly tested up front in this football game, Trevor, without Rylie Mills.
Yeah, I think for me, it came a little bit with a shock because, obviously injuries are a part of football, and you hear any coach and anybody that follows football closely, it's a part of the game, as unfortunate as it is. But, you kind of talked about some of the injuries that happened along the defensive line. And for me, when I hear about, injuries, I was thinking about, man, like I hope Howard Cross doesn't get re-injured. You know what I mean?
Right.
Man, I hope, no edge rusher. Rylie Mills was not even in that thought. And I think his injury adds a little bit of perspective that as unfortunate as it is, it could be anybody. But I agree with you. I don't think that this sways now the Notre Dame Georgia matchup in any direction specifically. I don't think that Georgia is now going to be able to run the ball for 200 yards because that's just not the kind of offense that they have this year, Rylie Mills aside. Right, you could make the argument, well, Notre Dame doesn't have Rylie Mills. Yeah, they didn't face a lot of teams that had a Rylie Mills type player, and they were still rushing for 129 yards a game, right? Mm-hmm. But then on the flip side of that coin is, I think you said it best, Notre Dame also now does not have another Rylie Mills kind of sitting and waiting. So it's going to be one of those questions of, who's it going to be? And I know that's going to be things that we dive into later, but his absence is going to be missed. I do think it will be more in the pass rush than in the run game because we've said all year that Gabe Rubio is their best run-stopping interior defensive lineman, right? But from a pass rushing standpoint, that's going to be really interesting to see what they do to replace and fill the shoes in 99. And no pun intended, but they're big shoes to fill, man. Yeah, so
literally and figuratively, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. So, Trev, when you look at what's next, there's 2 ways of looking at it. One is who steps up at his position. Well, 3 ways, actually. One is who steps up at his position. This is what it requires to replace a guy like Rylie Mills. Number 1, who replaces him specifically at the 3 technique. We'll talk about that. Number 2 is what does this mean for other guys needing to step up around him? Number 2. And then number 3, what other parts of the team can pick up the defense now? And we're going to dive into that as well. But let's first start about who is going to replace him in the starting lineup. And there's really 2 ways that Notre Dame can go with this, Trev. Number 1 is they can start someone else in his position, whether that's Gabriel Rubio or Donovan Heinisch. One of those 2 players can start in his place, and maybe both of them can play. That is obviously something they could do. They could do something where all 3 of the guys that have been in the rotation stay in a sort of a rotation where they all play, they're interchangeable, which is what I think we'll see in this game. So I expect us to see some of Rubio at 3 technique, some of Cross at 3 technique, and some of Heinisch at 3 technique. Because if you break Notre Dame's film down, the way they slide, like when they go from like an under to an over front, or a team, goes from a shift, they're strong right and they shift to strong left. You don't see Notre Dame's tackles flipping. what you see them do is bump down. So you'll see Rylie Mills play inside shade on the guard or over a center. You'll see Howard Cross outside of a 3 technique. You'll see them do a lot of 2, which is head up over the guards so they can kind of slant into both gaps. And they can not only slant A gap, they can slant B gap. They can also do inside twists with each other. They also allows them to do a lot more quick outside twists where you just crash that edge. You bring him around on a little bit of a tighter angle than you would if he was playing like in an inside technique, those type of things. And so they do a lot of those techniques where Howard Cross, Gabriel Rubio, and Donovan Heinisch, let's just say they had played quote unquote nose tackle all year. They will have plenty of experience lining up over top of guards and outside shaded of guards the way that Rylie Mills has. So it's not like you're not teaching them anything new technique-wise. You're not teaching them anything new from an alignment standpoint. There are going to be some things where you've got to remember that you're the 3 on a particular play call and not the nose in certain play calls, and make sure that you're executing your assignment, which is no different than if you're playing, Mike and Will the way that Kingston did. And you're thinking, okay, well, when run is away from me and I'm the Mike, I have this responsibility. When run is away from me, I'm going to Will have this responsibility. And sometimes you get them crossed up, right? Like that can happen. You've got to make sure that you're aware of that. But this isn't a thing where you're saying like, okay, let's move. You're missing your nose tackle. Howard Cross is out. So let's move Bryce Young in there to nose. Whole different animal, right? This is a completely different thing. That's not what this is. So my expectation is, and again, I'm not giving any inside information. No one's told me this. Just looking at how Notre Dame has handled these things in the past, my expectation is you're going to see some sort of 3-man rotation, a lot more of where it's Cross, Heinisch, and Rubio. Some version of that threesome is going to be 2 of those 3 guys are going to be on the field together a lot. Now, we'll talk about Armel Mukam in a minute, but I think that's the first big thing is just from a pure alignment standpoint, Trev, I think that's what we're going to see from Notre Dame is those 3 guys sort of playing in some sort of combination together.
Yeah, I mean, with being at this point in the season, you're not trying to teach anybody anything dramatically new. Like to your point, moving Bryce Young inside to kind of fill that void. I mean, they're just completely different style of players, right? I do want to ask you this, and I was thinking about this as the show's kind of gone on. Do you think schematically, because you brought up, different stunts, different twists, maybe different games, do you think schematically Notre Dame goes to any sort of different format, maybe runs a few more twists than they would have than when they had Rylie Mills in, or do you think it's going to be relatively similar in terms of pass rush situations?
It's possible they do that, Trev. I don't know that that's what Al Golden's going to want to do, just because I don't know that he's going to want to change the entire, alter the entire call scheme with Rylie out, where they, and what you're saying is not running new stuff. What you're saying is maybe, if I'm understanding you correctly, is not that they're going to run a bunch of twists we've never seen before, but maybe ramp up the usage of those things. Yep. Is that kind of more?
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of that, those quick, hard inside twists, especially in pass downs. So I think we'll see that. I mean, I think we'll see some of that stuff. Howard Cross can execute that effectively. Donovan Heinisch can execute that effectively. So I don't think that takes away from your desire to run some of those twists and stunts. I think it's where you have it in your back pocket, because there's 2 ways to look at it. One of the concerns that I have about this matchup is when you have Cross and Heinisch on the field together, you're very undersized. Now, the interesting thing is when Rubio's on the field in place of – so here's the thing. We have seen very little of Mills and Rubio on the field together. There's been at times, but we usually don't see that. We saw it a little bit more late in the year when Cross was down. But earlier in the year, Rubio was out. And then, and they wouldn't have the 2 big bodies on the field together. So until Cross went down, we didn't see a ton of that. So you're still going to have Rubio kind of as your big guy up the middle, but now you're going to have more snaps where it's Cross and Heinisch on the field together. And I don't know that we've seen a lot of that this season. And so you've got to be real careful of what your alignment is on early downs when you have those 2 guys in the game, and Howard Cross, your bigger guy at 285, So do they run a little more line games like we saw against Indiana, where they're doing quick, hard vertical slants and then crashing linebackers behind them? Do we see some early, twist? The danger is if you do some of that stuff on first and second down, Georgia tends to be sort of a gap running team they'll run zone and stuff, but they'll run gap. They're going to run power and counter and stuff like that. You get caught in a twist against that, and you could be in trouble. You know what I mean? And so there's some different risks to both angles. One is if you just play straight up like you have and just try to shoot gaps, some of those double teams against because they got big offensive linemen, some of your double teams against your 285-pound interior defenders in those down and distances could end up being some problems.
Sure.
Then the other side is if you get caught, if they catch you in one of those twists with the right gap scheme, called or they block it or they pick it up, you're in trouble. And so there's risks inherently to both of them. I think what you're going to primarily see is, hey, look, we got to keep doing what we're doing. We got to keep riding the horse that got us here and do what we think is going to work against Georgia. That's really what it comes down to. I don't think they are going to watch how Donovan Hinish has played, see how Gabriel Rubio has played, watch how Howard Cross has played, if he's healthy, back to 100% or anywhere close to it, and say, boy, we got to really change what we're doing. I don't think that necessarily is going to be the case. That may be more of okay, we're not able to do what we're doing here in the first quarter. We're going to have to change some things up and maybe get a little bit more aggressive with some of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I figured as much. Like, it's not a situation where it's you reinvent the wheel. It's just I didn't know if it was something that they could go to, if, like you said, something isn't working and they have to make that sort of switch. So I agree with you. So you mentioned Howard Cross quite a bit, and he's going to kind of be that kind of key integral player that now has the opportunity to step up, because I could be wrong about this. I feel like we've seen quite a bit of Rylie Mills without Howard Cross over the last couple seasons, but we haven't seen a lot of Howard Cross without Rylie Mills. You know what I mean?
We haven't seen that. And that's going to be a big question. Look, if Howard Cross was 100% healthy, and because we saw him sort of in the middle of the year this year, and we saw him at stretches last year where he was their best defensive lineman. In certain games, he was their best defensive lineman this year. Last year, for stretches, he was their best defensive lineman. We've seen Howard Cross show the ability to be an impactful player, very disruptive, tackles for loss. And what's interesting is, even though he's been banged up quite a bit this year, he still put up pretty good disruptive numbers for a guy that missed as much time as he did. He's still third on this defense and with 5.5 tackles for loss. And he's still second on this defense with 4 sacks, despite missing 3 games with an injury, really 3.5 games with an injury. And so he's had his moments, but he's going to have, like, this discouraging thing for me is if Howard Cross looks like he did against Indiana, that's where I'm getting worried, because he had no burst off the line. He just had no juice coming off the line. If the extra time off, the extra further and further away from that injury he suffered against Florida State allows him to get some of his quickness back, his explosiveness back, I think they're going to be okay, because Donovan Hinish has played really good football since Howard Cross went down. And Gabriel Rubio is a talented football player. This is a former top 100 recruit as well. That's 316 pounds. I mean, so it's not like Notre Dame is going from Rylie Mills to a walk-on. And if Armel Mukum does have to play, he's got a lot to learn. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but this is a kid that had my number 2 upside grade on the defense in the 2023 recruiting class, who's a very talented, athletic 300-pounder as well. That's just still learning to play inside and learning to play with that weight. So, but the big thing is you need Howard Cross. The number one thing, you need Howard Cross, whether he's playing the nose or the 3 technique, to be Howard Cross. You need him to be the best version of himself. You need him to be, hey, that All-American player you were last year, that All-American player you showed flashes of being this season. Like, we need to see that guy. We need to see that guy step up and really be an impact player. That guy that went out there and was very impactful against Stanford. That guy that went out there and looked really impressive and disruptive against Louisville. That guy that's had some of those moments this year that makes you say, okay, that's the All-American guy that we remember. That's the All-American guy, that we saw play this year. That you need that guy to show up. You need that guy to be disruptive. You need that guy, against Louisville, he didn't have any tackles for loss or sacks, but he had 5 pressures in that game. He had 4 pressures and 2 sacks against Stanford. You need to see that guy back. That's the guy that Notre Dame needs to see. The guy that took over the Duke game last year. The guy that's had some of those big-time moments. You need him to be at his best. That's the best way to overcome losing Rylie Mills, is for Howard Cross to give you that impact player that he can be Now, it's different than Rylie. How he dominates is different than Rylie. He wins more with quickness and leverage and getting up underneath you and getting into the backfield, where Rylie can kind of come off the line, rock the guard back, and then throw him like we saw against Indiana. They're different players. And so you're not going to ask Howard Cross to be the same player Rylie was. Hey, we need you to, two gap here. We need you to come off the line, bend the guard back, then dismiss him and, beat him the same way Rylie beat him. No, you ask him to be himself, but he's got to be the best version of himself. If they get that version of Howard Cross, where Howard does let's remember, when did Rylie had been playing well for several games. Rylie started to turn it around against Louisville and Stanford, right? But he took things to a whole nother level when Howard went down, because Rylie took it on himself like, hey, look, my dude is out. I got to step up and carry this team now. And he did. They need Howard to now do the same thing. Now, I have no doubt that Howard will want to do that.
Sure.
But can he physically do that still coming back from the knee injury? That's the question for me, Trevor.
Yeah, and it's just going to be one of those that it's going to be so frustrating that we're going to have to wait until game day to figure out the answer to that question. You know what I mean? And all the points you said, I could not agree with more. The production that Rylie Mills is – that Notre Dame is losing with Rylie. I mean, you're losing the team leader in sacks right now, But not only are you losing his on-the-field production, you're losing the leadership that Rylie Mills also brought with him on the field and that presence. Because to your point, that was the next level of his game that continued to step up. Because I think we all believe that Rylie Mills had that type of physical dominating performance in him week in and week out. And thank goodness he showed it down the stretch in Notre Dame's win streak, right? But I saw him kind of change from this, he was a leader. He was voted a captain, to where you could tell, like, when he was on the field, he was one of those guys that if the defense needed something to happen, people were kind of honing in and looking on number 99. And I wholeheartedly believe that Howard can be that player, because we've seen him be that player. But I'm hoping, and kind of similar to what we said about the secondary with USC, hopefully this performance from Howard Cross against IU was him just kind of shaking off the rust a little bit and getting the engine back up started, because that was his first football game in like 7 weeks, as crazy as that is. It's weird to think that Florida State was almost that long ago. But yeah, I'm hoping and chalking it up to that, and hopefully it's not a lingering like, hey, yeah, unfortunately the dude's just not 100%. So
that's when I'll get worried, Trev, is if we're watching that game in the first quarter, like, Howard's not coming off with any juice. That's when you're like, okay, they're going to have to do something else. Like, schematically, they're going to have to do some things to protect the interior guys.
Yep.
They are.
Yep.
They are.
Schematically, they're going to have to do some changes. And Marcus Freeman preaches it in his press conference, and he did today, is, some of these guys, they've been preparing for moments like this all season. It's not something that you ask them to do today at 10 a.m., you know what I mean? And so it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be a little bit of both. Right? Howard Cross is going to have to step up in a big way and kind of and perform at the highest level that he has been. Basically take his highlight reel from 2023 and his highlight reel from this year, and you got to put it all together and mash it up against Georgia. But, kind of along the lines of people that need to step up, listed on the depth chart. Notre Dame released their official depth chart today, and Gabriel Rubio is listed as the starter in place of Rylie Mills. So what do we got to see from him on New Year's Day?
He's got to be a dude in the run game. That's what Rylie Mills. That's what Gabriel Rubio needs to do. Look, like, he's not that he can't give you the occasional pass rush. We've seen that occasionally from him, but it's more of a. He had a sack against USC. He had another disruptive play where he could have made a play. There was I'm trying to remember what game. There was another game recently where he had a guy. He kind of chased a quarterback out. It's not that he can't rush the quarterback. It's just that's not what they've asked him to do. And maybe he steps up and he provides you with some pass rushing potential in this game. Maybe he does. But to me, that's a cherry on top. What I need Gabriel Rubio to do is you've got to be a dog against the run. You've got to basically come there with however many snaps you're going to play in this game. I don't know how many it's going to be. He hasn't played more than 34 snaps all year, right? Played 29 against Indiana, played 34 against Army, 25 against USC. Rylie Mills was playing 40, 50 snaps a game. Right. So those 40, 50 snaps are going to have to get covered by somebody. And I think Gabriel's a guy that maybe you can add another 10 or 15 snaps onto him. But when you're in the game, you're a first and second down dude. Because part of the reason Rylie had so many more snaps than the other guys is he would stay on the field on third down and rush the quarterback, where Gabriel's going to come off on third down, most likely. Unless there's some, third and shorts where they want to make sure he can protect the nose in case they, are in, hey, they can still pop a draw here or pop an inside run here and you still need that presence. Sure, that's fine. But in your dime defense and your true nickel defense, where you're in third and medium, late long medium, or like getting close to long, but third and 5 and 6, and then you get into third and long for sure, you're going to be bringing him off the field. But he's got to be a dog on first and second down. You need Gabriel to play with a more consistent motor than we've really seen from him for much of this year. And look, that's the reality. Look, your dude is down. Somebody's got to raise their level of play. Like for Howard Cross, it's not raise your level of play. It's just get back to being the dude you were, and it's going to be about health. If Howard Cross is healthy, I have no doubt you're going to get the best version of Howard Cross. I think he's going to play as hard as he can and as well as he physically can. We just got to see what that's going to look like.
Right.
With Gabriel, he's been more inconsistent with his performance, with his focus, with his effort. And that's what you need to see more of from him is we've got to get that dog version of you back. And we've seen that. Like last year, he was in and out of the lineup, but last year he was an absolute dude against the run, I thought last year.
Yeah.
And he's been a dude at times against the run this year, but at times we saw against Indiana early in the game against Indiana, they were stretching at him. They were running right at him on stretch stuff, and he was getting sealed because he wasn't doing what he needed to do and beating blocks and getting that kind of push. They're going to need Rylie. They're going to need Gabriel Rubio to take his game to another level. He's going to have to be more consistent with his technique. He's going to have to be more consistent with his assignment correctness, and he's going to have to play with an even higher motor. Like we need to see the best version of Gabriel, which is a good football player that would start for a lot of teams. We got to see that at a much higher percentage on Saturday, because if he can do that, then I believe this Notre Dame defensive line will be okay. Like, honestly, if just those two things happen, here's what it comes down to, and we'll talk about Donovan in a second. Howard and Donovan, keep doing what you're doing when you're healthy. That's it. Just do what you do. The only guy that really needs to raise his level of play from what we've seen when healthy is Gabriel. He's the guy that has to raise his level of play. And when you're going to replace a guy like Rylie Mills, you need to have somebody steps up and says, I got you. When you lost Benjamin Morrison, Leonard Moore was that guy. When you lost Jordan Patelho, Boubacar was that guy. When Boubacar went down, Junior Tuihalamaka became that guy. And then Josh Burnham came back, and he's helped with that against the run. So, we've seen that this year where guys go down and somebody else has to step up. And we're going to need to see that at defensive tackle. And Gabriel Rubio is that guy that has to take his game to another level. If Gabriel can be the best version of himself in this game, then I think Georgia will continue to have a tough time running the football. That's how I look at it. But that's like, Trev, I don't ever get worried about, hey, you just need to play your game. We talk about against Indiana. You didn't need anybody to play out of their mind. Just play your game. Just be yourself. And for most of the Notre Dame football team, that's all they've got to do against Georgia. This is not one of those games where Notre Dame needs everybody to play out of their minds to have any shot to beat Georgia. That's not what this is. Number one, and it's not necessarily because Georgia's not good. They are. This is not 2021 Georgia. We've talked about that. This is still a very good Georgia team. But it's more so, this is a better Notre Dame football team than we've seen in the past. So you don't need, I need Drake Bone to play the game of his life. Well, if he does, they're going to have a much better shot of winning, but you don't need it to have a chance to win this football game. The one guy that is the exception to that needs to play at a level above what we have seen this season is Gabriel Rubio. He's got to take his game to another level. That is a must in this game, because if he does, and Howard, because Howard Cross is not going to be 100% in this game.
Right.
You don't go from looking like he looked against Indiana to 100% prime form against Georgia. Now, as long as he's closer to that, that's what we're looking for. But what helps Howard not have to carry the same load that Rylie was is Gabriel Rubio stepping up. That's the big key. He's got to step up and say, hey, take your game to another level. He's the one guy that has to do that for this Notre Dame defense if they're going to continue playing at the high level they have this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you phrased Gabe Rubio's play, right? No, like nobody can ask anybody on that depth chart to come in and be Rylie Mills because he is a one of a kind. There's a reason why he made like the preseason ESPN freaks list, whatever that was, right? There's nobody like Rylie Mills.
Like I said, he was a second team All-American on Sporting News.
Right. But Gabe Rubio needs to play in a way that is the best of his skill set, right? Gabe Rubio is not a pass rusher like Rylie Mills is, right? But what he has shown flashes of is being a better run stopper than Rylie Mills throughout his time at Notre Dame.
More stout, right? I mean, well, let me ask you this. I would say he's more disruptive against the run. Rylie is, but Gabriel's more stout, which you kind of want. He's more physical, just like punishing. Would you agree with that assessment as far as them as run defenders?
Yes, absolutely. Like the way that I view Gabe Rubio is kind of like how I see Sam Pendleton in the run game. You know what I mean? Like that's who I like. They just get after it, dude. They're maulers. They're big guys in the middle that can just eat up space and get after it. I agree 100%. But yeah, I mean, Gabe Rubio is going to be a guy that he's going to have to play the best football that he's played in a Notre Dame uniform. You know, and that hasn't been like for Notre Dame to beat Georgia. We don't need Jeremiah Love to play, just go take it to the next level. Now, we're going to break it down later this week and throughout next week. There are some players on offense that will have to play better, right? But that better just means what we've seen throughout points in the season. Not we haven't seen it yet this year. Gabe Rubio, to your point, is the kid that it's like, we know you have it in you, but you're going to have to take it up that next notch to help fill that void. Right. But within your skill set, within what you're able to do, because nobody's asking you to go be a third down Rylie Mills interior pass rusher. Right. But as long as you can go in and you can fill in from the run game perspective, it's going to be great.
I mean, if he is, it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game for Notre Dame. But to your point, Trevor, good coaches don't ask players to be something they're not.
100%.
Right. And what we've learned about Al Golden and Al Washington and those type of guys, like they don't ask Josh Burnham to be Boubacar. They've never once asked Josh Burnham to be Boubacar. They said, nope, Josh, you're replacing Boubacar in the starting lineup. We're going to let you be you. And so the defense had to change. The Vipers no longer the position that they're just letting that guy. Like if you go back and look when Boubacar was really rolling in games like 3 through 5 before he got hurt, they were lining up and running a lot of base looks with the D line and just letting Rylie do his thing and letting Howard do his thing and letting Boubacar do his thing. And it was starting to look really good. Well, then Boubacar goes down. They're not saying, okay, well, Junior and Rylie and Josh, we need you guys to be Boubacar. They're not asking to do that. And that's what good coaches do. And they're not, like, to your point, they're not going to ask Gabriel to be Rylie Mills. They're going to have to get the best version of Gabriel in this game. And to your point, that's going to be a guy that's not going to be in there on third down like Gabriel was. But he is a guy that on passing downs needs to get a bull rush and get them big old paws up. And we've seen him be able to do that. And so it's playing into his strengths. If you're asking him to do long twists, that's probably not a good idea with Gabriel in the game, right? Like, it's just not really his game. You can do some inside stuff with him, but do the long outside twist like Rylie does. That's not asking him to do what he does best. And I have a hard time believing that someone as good as Al Golden that's made the adjustments he's needed to make when other guys have gone down is going to all of a sudden say, hey, Gabriel, we need you to be Rylie Mills.
Yeah.
I just don't think you're going to do that.
No, 100%. I mean, basically what that does for you is it just kind of takes away a void that Rylie Mills is leaving if Gabriel Rubio plays to the best of his capabilities, because that's why it's so important that 97 goes in and plays the best run stopping game that he has had, because for Al Golden mentally, that's like, okay, we kind of got that taken care of. Now we can kind of focus on third down and distance situations. How do we generate a pass rush from the interior? Like, where do we make that in? Which to me, some of that I think comes from Donovan Heinisch, a guy that we've been talking about pretty routinely throughout the podcast. And Brian, I know you mentioned it and said that, Donovan Heinisch is somebody that we've seen what he can do this year. He had 3 sacks total between Florida State and Virginia. He's got to keep doing what he's doing. So when he's in there, making the most of his opportunity now to step up and be not just a role player, but an integral part of this defensive line, what does that kind of look like for you?
Keep doing what you're doing, dude. Like, this is the guy that can help replace Rylie Mills' pass rush ability. Like, if on third down, it was either Howard or Donovan replacing the role that Rylie Mills had, I could see that. I mean, that's the one thing Donovan, since Howard went down, Donovan has been a very disruptive player. And I'll point it out. So like the game that he went down, it was the Florida State game. In the 5 games since he went down, he has had, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's had 8 pressures in 5 games. That includes 3 sacks and 2 hits on the quarterback, according to Pro Football Focus. And he's also had 12 run stops in those 5 games, right? So when Howard went down, right? Because, like, guys, this is what good teams do. When Howard went down, Rylie raised his level of play, and Donovan Hinish said, I got you, my dude. While you're out, I'm going to go handle business. And then when he came back, you keep handling business, right? And so that's where I think Donovan Hinish could have that level of impact in this game. Now, the concern is this is a big, physical Georgia offensive line that's built more like Texas A&M than it is some of the teams that he has been handling in the last couple months. That's a bit of a concern. But again, are they going to use him correctly to run some of those line games? That's where Donovan can be effective. Use your pad level, use your leverage, use your quickness to go beat these bigger, slower offensive linemen. That's going to be the key. And if you're just asking him to come off and lock up the way that you're asking Rylie Mills to lock up at 300-plus pounds, 6'5", with super long arms and tremendous power and all that, well, then you're putting that kid in a situation where he's not going to be successful. And that was our criticism of Notre Dame with Donovan Hinish in the first 2 games. As the season wore on, they started allowing him to be more, okay, now we know what Donovan can do well. Let's ask him to do what he does well. And that's allowed him to be more effective. And he's the guy that, to me, can help really replace the pass rush the most effectively. They're going to need that from him. There's no doubt.
Yeah, Donovan Hinish started becoming, a borderline game wrecker type of interior defensive lineman. Once they kind of took the leash off of him, for lack of a better metaphor, and just saying, hey, dude, go be disruptive. Just go wreak havoc. And it started to pay off in a big way. And I think kind of the cherry on top and the accumulation of all that was the Florida State and Virginia game, where he just went in and, man, it's hard to take away from somebody that has a 3-sack performance in Rylie Mills. And there was a lot of conversation about Donovan Hinish getting his 2, man. It's not often can you take the spotlight away from a guy like Rylie Mills, and Donovan Hinish performed really well in those 2 games. Yep. And I think was the only interior defensive lineman against Virginia that got a sack. Mm-hmm. So all the other ones came from around the edge. And I think actually one of them came on Jack Kaiser on a blitz up the middle. But yeah, Donovan Hinish, I agree. He's going to be the guy that from a pass rush perspective can replace some of the production loss from Rylie Mills. You kind of break it down between the 2 roles of Donovan Hinish and Gabe Rubio, and they're almost kind of like splitting duties now. Like Rylie Mills is, from a first and second down standpoint, need Gabriel Rubio to step up on 3rd down. Donnie, we need you to get in there, man. We need you to go and get after it. So I agree. Absolutely. Are there any other players that you think, well, I know that there are other players, but what other players do you think?
The guy that I think could potentially take some snaps on the first is Armo Mukum. I don't know that he will. But the hope is, because like we've seen this in the offseason before, like you guys remember last year when we're going into the bowl game against Oregon State, and Blake Fisher opts out, Joe Alt opts out, and we're thinking, okay, it's going to be Emil Wagner at right tackle, and Tosh Baker's going to step up at left tackle, and okay, here we go, we know what it's going to be. But then Charles Jagasaw was like, well, hold on a second, I got something to say about that. And what they saw from Charles Jagasaw in bowl prep was this is a different cat, and he went in and earned a starting job, and then goes into the offseason as the locked down the left tackle job, right? Does that happen with a guy like Armo Mukum? Does that happen with a Sean Sevillano? Does that happen with a Devin Houston type of player? I don't know the answer. I think Armel probably has the best chance to be that guy because he's played the most of that group of guys. But that's now asking a lot of a guy that really hasn't done a whole lot this year, just hasn't played a whole lot, to come in and say, okay, you're going to step up and be that dude. This is a kid that's only played 60 snaps all year, Trev. You know what I mean? And the vast majority of that was mop-up minutes. Now, he's also a kid that had 2 pressures against Virginia and had a pressure against Florida State. So back-to-back games in which he played, he had 3 pressures on only 16 pass rushes. He's an athletic kid. He's incredibly talented, physically talented. He's just very raw.
Sure.
Does the light go on for him during bowl prep? Does the extra reps that he's going to get in practice kind of help him take off? I don't know. That's not like, you can't expect that to be the case. You just be thankful if it becomes that, if the case, right? I mean, it's not like, okay, they're going to beat Georgia because Armel Mookham's going to step in and replace, Rylie Mills and come in and be a game wrecker. Okay, now you're talking fantasy land as far as like expecting it or predicting it, right? Now you're just let me take a dartboard of things that might happen and throw at it blindly. You know what I mean? Like, but
Right.
that also doesn't mean it can't happen. I mean, I've talked about this before, and we've seen at times guys kind of step up and do that. I mean, Timmy Smith in the NFL, I've said this before, had one good game his entire career. The guy rushed for like 300 yards his entire career, but he ran for 236 against the Broncos in the Super Bowl. Nobody knew who he was before the game, and nobody heard anything from him after the game. It just happens sometimes, right? I mean, some guys kind of just step up and just have their career moments. It happens. But you can't predict it, or you can't expect it, or say, okay, well, they're like, if they can't win without Armel Mookham stepping up and being a dude, then they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be in trouble. You just hope that he can be that guy. I can remember different position, but I remember the 2018 season. And Chris Olave goes into the final stretch of the season. They're playing Michigan State, Maryland, and Michigan, and Ohio State, is trying to bounce back from that really bad loss to Purdue and get back in the college football playoff hunt. And Chris Olave goes into that last 4-game stretch with 2 career catches as a true freshman for 19 yards. They were both mop-up minutes. And in the last 4 games of the season, he catches 10 passes for like 180-something yards and 3 touchdowns, including 2 for 48 and 2 touchdowns against Michigan, then 5 for 79 in the touchdown in the Big Ten title game against Northwestern. Like, where did this come from? You know what I mean? Like, that happens sometimes. But if I were to sit here and say, okay, guys, don't worry, Notre Dame's going to be fine because Armel Mookham is in the lineup now, that would be an unrealistic expectation for him to just assume it's going to happen. But we have seen guys in the postseason with extra practice time and extra reps, the light goes on. Because here's the deal. If Joe Alt and Blake Fisher don't opt out, Charles Jagasaw doesn't get that extra time in practice to then have the light bulb go on. Well, he's going to get that now. Armel's going to get that now. Will the light go on? I don't know. If it does, Notre Dame's going to be just fine. If it doesn't, then we're going to need the first 3 things to happen. And that's going to be a challenge. And then, okay, it's not just about doing it for 1 game, but now it's about doing it for 3 if you're going to win a title. And that's the bigger concern for me is, can you beat Georgia without Rylie Mills? Sure. Yeah, you can, because it's a team game. No one, you know what I mean? It's like, it's if the other Rylie got hurt, I'd be a lot more concerned just because he's asked to do so much more. But, this is a guy that you look at and say, okay, could he do it? Sure. Are you relying on it? Maybe. But as a unit, it's like, but can they do it for 3 games? Well, we're going to find that out. But for right now, they just need to worry about doing it for 1. And that's going to be against Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not something I'm betting the house on. You know what I mean? Like, but you're right. There have been moments. I mean, you have Charles Jagasaw last year stepped up in a bowl game when it was kind of his time to kind of show what he could do, and filling the shoes of a Joe Alt is not an easy task, right? Like, I also think of players, it wasn't really in like a big moment, but like Jordan Faison burst onto the scene against Louisville, and then again in the bowl game when after – Rico and Tobias and all them opted out and they entered the transfer portal, it was like, okay, well, Jaden Thomas could step up. They still have Greathouse, and the best receiver that game was Jordan Faison. He had the most explosive plays, right? And so, it happens. But again, if you're going to ask me, like, if we rewind back to the Sun Bowl, it's like, hey, which wide receiver do you think steps up today? It's like, well, Greathouse has to have a game. Jaden Thomas is the most experienced. He's got to go in and have a game. I don't really think it was going to be little number 80, the lacrosse player stepping up, but he did, right? So, Armel Mookham has a good opportunity to make the most of his snaps.
That's
right?
A great example. That's a great example of Jordan Faison stepping up because other guys were banged up and hurt. Who saw that coming? Who thought, hey, guys, I know he hasn't played a snap all year, but I think going to this Louisville game, Jordan Faison's going to step up and have a big-time touchdown in this game. Yep, that. I'd be like, come on, bro. You're being a little bit of a homer right now. What are you, a lacrosse fan or something? Like, what's going on, buddy? And made fun of you and laughed at you, and then you to come in the post-game show making fun of us and laughing at us because that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the thing, Trev. It's like I was on a show about Georgia before, and it's like, talking about Georgia losing their quarterback. Well, Ohio State had a situation in 2014, the first year of the 14 playoff, where their starting quarterback goes down, who technically was their backup quarterback. Because if you remember, Braxton Miller was the starter. He got hurt in fall camp. JT Barrett takes over. He gets hurt against Michigan. Cardell Jones takes over and leads them to a title. But they didn't ask Cardell to be JT. They said, we're going to lean on other things. Our defense has to play great. We're going to run the ball more with Ezekiel. We're going to take some more shots down the field. And other guys stepped up. And that's what's going to have to happen in Notre Dame. It's if they're going to advance, but it's also what's going to have to happen at Georgia if they're going to advance, because they're going to need some guys to step up at quarterback and some other spots as well. And the team whose players do the best job of handling that, to me, is the one that's going to win this football game. And hopefully Notre Dame's guys can do that. But like that's what great teams do, Trevor. It's like you can sit here and cry. Here's one thing I know that Notre Dame players are not doing. Here's what I know they're not doing. I know they're not sitting there saying, woe is us. I know that they feel terrible for their teammate. They feel terrible for their brother, but they're going to have that mindset of, hey, next man in. They're not going to have the mindset that some Notre Dame fans are of like, we're screwed. Like there was somebody that put a chat in and was like, we're totally screwed. And it was just like, well, I mean, come on now. Like, let's be a little bit mentally tougher than that. You know what I mean? But like, that's what the players need to be, Travis. Like, hey, look, we miss our brother, but we're good. We got this. You know what I mean? And we're going to do it for him.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, but what's the example for that? It's him. He's the example for that, because that's exactly what he did when Howard went down.
Yeah,
and he was like, "Okay, I got you." He went like literally had a sack the next 2 plays after he got hurt, and they're going to need to have somebody kind of step in and fill that same type of void now that he's down, and we'll see who that's going to be.
I was just about to say, man, it's going to almost act as a rallying cry for the rest of this defense to step up and do it for a guy that is given everything, his time, his body, his emotions, like everything to this program. It's almost going to act like a rallying cry, in my opinion. I mean, you feel for the kid because it's, all the work that he put into it. But in that, you kind of get, the Armel Bukums of the world getting their opportunity of, you and I say it all the time. In the playoffs and big games and bowl games, your dudes have to be dudes. I think it's also true that sometimes you don't know if you have a dude until they have to go be a dude.
Right.
And so that's an exciting opportunity that Armel has. Gabe Rubio has that opportunity to step up. We've seen Donovan Heinrich and Howard Cross at their best this year. Right. And so all of that has to be consistent. So before we move on, I know, we briefly talked about the other side of the ball also can have an impact. There's different facets of this team outside of the defensive line, front seven, that can step up and help out. We're big about talking about complementary football. So, Bryan, to you, what can the offense do to kind of take some of this pressure away from not having Rylie Mills?
It's not so much about what do they need to do. It's just they need to play well. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, Trevor. And part of overcoming a loss somewhere is the entire team has to step up, right? I mean, and so we talked about like the USC game. There's a lot of talk about, USC exposed Notre Dame and Christian Gray sucks. And, this is that they're overrated in this and that and the other thing. And they showed, I think, against Indiana that, hey, that was truly an anomaly. We didn't forget how to play football. We didn't just get lucky the first 11 games, right? We are pretty good. Just had a bad day. But why did Notre Dame win that game and put themselves in the playoff, which I don't know that they would have been at 10-2. I don't know if they would have deserved to be in the playoff at 10-2. But what put them in there? It was the offense that, hey, guys, we got you today. And that's what's going to have to happen in this game. We talked a lot in the first segment, Trevor, about, Howard Cross stepping up and Donovan Heinrich and Gabriel Rubio. Maybe Armel Bukums steps up. Your linebackers are going to have to step up and make more plays, and you might have to use them a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that can happen in this football game is your offense has to come out and be play really good football. We have seen this offense be that way. And you're going to need the offensive line to play a really good football game. You're going to have to they're going to have to be on top of their game anyway, even if Rylie Mills was healthy and Benjamin Morrison was healthy and Boubacar Traore was healthy. You'd still need your offensive line to play good football. Well, this Georgia team got ran on by Georgia Tech and UMass. Yeah, I watched those games. Trust me, I watched several teams run on Georgia this year, but I also saw some of those games when Georgia was a little pissed off and played like they wanted to dominate. And I watched them absolutely annihilate Texas twice on the ground. I mean, Texas in 2 games ran for 60 yards against Georgia in 2 games combined. I watched them shut down Florida's run game. I watched them keep Florida's, Ole Miss's run game relatively in check. I saw them completely shut down Tennessee's run game in the second half of that game. Right, so they're capable of being that if you don't play your best football. You're going to need that. You're going to need Riley Leonard to be the best version of himself, right? So if one team captain named Riley's down on the other side of the ball, the other team captain named Riley needs to step up and say, hey, like it's not about putting pressure on yourself, but like, hey guys, we got to go out there and we got to pick up this group. We got to pick up our brothers on the other side of the ball. It's not just them, and say, hey, we got to come out and play our best football. We got to do what we know we're capable of doing, what we've shown we're capable of doing, and go do that. I've got to make good decisions with the football. I got to get the ball where it needs to get to. When I throw you the football, you got to make those catches. When the holes are there, running backs, you got to hit them. When those opportunities are there for me as a quarterback, I got to take them. And so part of being successful and overcoming a loss as big as Rylie Mills is the other side of the ball. Because here's the thing, guys, Georgia's having the same conversation, or at least they should be having the same conversation right now with their defense. Hey, Carson Beck's out. Our offensive line's been banged up. They should be a little bit healthier for this game because they've had some time to rest. But, they're a banged up football team on offense as well, and they're missing their quarterback. So they're going to need their defense to step up and be the best version of themselves. And can the Notre Dame offense overcome that and go out there and score some points? I mean, that's the other part of this, Trev, is the Notre Dame offense has to say, hey, listen, we've done our thing, right? We've put up good numbers against teams that aren't as good as us and all that kind of stuff. And we've had some good moments against teams that are pretty good. But guys, we got to play a 4-quarter game. That's what it needs to be. So the offense is going to have to take this a little bit of pride in, hey, it's not just about those guys overcoming Rylie Mills' injury. We can take something to overcome Rylie Mills' injury by coming out here and playing the best version of Notre Dame football on offense. So I think that's a big piece of this puzzle as well, Trev, is you're going to need that side of the ball to carry you a little bit. You're going to need your special teams to make sure that if Georgia's going to score, they're going on long scoring drives. Win the field position battle. You can't have missed field goal opportunities. You can't have, as an offense, you get in the red zone, you need touchdowns. I mean, all those things are true, and we'll break all those things down as we get closer to the game. But just big picture, this might be the biggest thing to overcome Rylie Mills' injury. This might be the most important aspect, is your offense has to do to Georgia what some teams have done to Georgia this year. But we haven't seen Georgia really be that defense in some of the bigger games at times. Does Notre Dame have the firepower at receiver to hurt them the way that Bama did or the way that Ole Miss did? Can they run on Georgia? Can they be that team? Because if you think about the 2 games where the Georgia offense got worked and lost games in the regular season, it was because teams threw all over them. And that's not who Notre Dame has been. Can that change in this game? They don't have to light the world on fire, man. But, Ole Miss threw for 263, averaged 9.4 yards per attempt. Alabama threw for 374, averaged 11.3 yards per attempt. Ole Miss or Mississippi State scored 31 points on Georgia. Their quarterback threw for 306 yards, 8.3 yards per attempt. Georgia Tech, Haynes King threw for 303 yards and 8.2 yards per attempt. So in the games where Georgia has given up points, the other team's offense really stepped up and made plays in the throwing game on top of being able to run the football. Like Notre Dame's not going to be able to run the ball on Georgia the way Georgia Tech did if they're not able to make some plays in the passing game the way that Georgia Tech did and made Georgia pay for trying to stop their run game. That's going to be a big part of this. And I would argue, Trevor, and I want to get your thoughts on this, I would argue this is without a doubt the number one best way that Notre Dame can overcome not having Rylie Mills is for the Notre Dame offense to finally step up and say, it's our turn to now carry this football team. It's our turn.
Yeah.
And do it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've seen it through spurts, right? But now we as a fan base, as people that break down the game, are going to have to see it for a full football game and potentially moving forward. But obviously first, let's look at the matter at hand. Notre Dame's offense has done it at times. They did it against Louisville. The offense kind of needed to step up a little bit. And like we've talked about all year, we think that Louisville first half was kind of the turning point of the season, where the offense rattled off 21 points in the first quarter and kind of showed the defense, hey, guys, this won't be like 22. Hey, guys, this won't be like 23. You don't have to carry us in any big game. You have to hold opponents to 10 because we're only going to get you to 14, right? I think that was the moment, right? You saw it against USC, where the defense was just, they didn't give up a score on their first drive, but USC marched right down the field, and you could kind of get that sense of like, okay, this is going to be an interesting one for the defense, and the offense was like, okay, we got you, rattled off 35 points in 3 quarters. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be able to do that against Georgia, right? But example still being, Notre Dame's offense has shown at times that they can pick up the slack where the defense has not had their best game. And that is the sign of a championship caliber football team. That is a sign of really good complementary football. And so the best way that what Riley Leonard can do, what Mike Denbrock can do, what the starting offensive line can do is go out onto the field and sustain drives, not go 3 and out. Don't turn the football over. Don't put your defense in a spot where they have to be like, whew, all right, got to get another stop again. You know what I mean? So do the best that you can to alleviate the pressure, because not only are you helping out the void of Rylie Mills and you're helping out the defense as a whole, you're helping out the guys like Gabe Rubio, who is now also having to be tasked with, I got to play the best football that I've ever played. You're helping out the Armel Mookums of the world. A kid that's going to come in, like you said, he's very raw. He's going to be wide-eyed of like, first meaningful snaps in a game is against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in the quarterfinals of the first 12-team college football playoff. So lean on the aspects of your team that have experience, that have played in big games before, that have played the duration of the season. So offense is going to play, honestly, you can chalk it up to like a 1A, 1B type thing. Yes, Howard Cross has to step up. Yes, Donnie Heinisch has to step up. Gabe Rubio has to play at a level that he has not played yet in 2024. And Armel Mookum is going to have to make the most of his opportunities. 1B, the offense is going to have to do what they can and play the best football that they've played all season. So all of those things, it's going to be an interesting matchup to see what happens without the absence of 99. But, man, that's a tough one. And it's not how you want that to end for that kid because of all that he's done for this school. But like I said, it's the perfect opportunity for this team to kind of have, sometimes you look at injuries and it's really tough. Injuries are always a tough blow. But you go back through and you look at, gosh, how did Notre Dame go on this 10-game win streak? How did they keep up this intensity week in and week out? And, you lose BMO. And that's just a rallying cry. Hey, let's rattle off these next couple games for him, man. Then Howard Cross goes down. It's like, this is our, 6-year guy. He's been here he's getting this program everything. Like, let's keep it rolling for him. And now Rylie Mills goes down. And it's just kind of it's just continuing to feed the fire that is this football team. So I'm not trying to paint the picture that this is actually secretly a good thing, because please just give me a healthy Rylie Mills, right? But I think above all else, getting back to the point, if this offense can play like we've seen them play at spurts this season and take the pressure off of Al Golden's squad, it's going to be a lot more easy for this defense to get stuff done. So I know we're on the same page about that, man. Anything else you got for Rylie?
No, it just comes down to it, buddy. You don't overcome a loss like this. Just like we said, Georgia's going to be having the same conversation about losing Carson Beck. It's not they're not going to say, hey, Gunnar Stockton, go win us the game the same way that Carson Beck would have. It's, hey, run game, we need you guys to step up and be better. Hey, pass defense, we need you guys to step up and be better. Hey, run defense, we need you to shut down Notre Dame's run game. Hey, it's going to be a tall task. It's not going to be easy, but we need you guys to step up and play, be the best version of yourself. They're having this, at least if they're being objective, because like from what I've seen so far, I've seen like 2 Georgia shows. They think Notre Dame sucks and they're just going to blow Notre Dame out. That's what I've seen so far. But we're talking about the coaches. We're talking about the team, the guys that know ball. They're saying, hey, look, this isn't going to be about, hey, let's all ask Carson Beck to just step up and be the entire replacement for Carson Beck. Or excuse me, they're Gunnar Stockton to be the replacement for Carson Beck. No, they're going to say, hey, Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier, we need you guys to step up. Hey, offensive line, you guys are a little bit back to health now, right? We got everybody back, should have everybody back for the bowl game, right? Let's get you guys going. We need you guys to step up and be the best version of yourself. Hey, get Dylan Bell back to health after he's got some time off. Hey, Arian Smith, we need you to catch the dang ball, my man. Tight ends, we need you guys to step up like you did against Tennessee in the second half. Defense, we need you to play like you did against Texas, not like you played against Georgia Tech and Alabama and Ole Miss, right? I mean, those are the things they're going to need to do. They're having that same conversation Notre Dame's having. Hey, we lost one of our dudes. Who's going to step up and replace that guy? That's going to be the question. That's going to be the question. And how well Notre Dame's other parts can handle that is going to go a long way towards determining who wins this football game. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you win by a point or by 50. The thing is just win the game.
Just win, baby.
And there's 21 other spots of people that are going to have to step up and help overcome the loss of Rylie Mills, just like there's 21 other people on the football field, starting lineup that are going to have to step up and help replace Carson Beck for Georgia. That's what it's going to be. So We're going to see if they can get it done. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if this team has shown us anything, they're resilient. So they're going to need to definitely lean more into that. But that's going to do it for the Rylie Mills portion, guys. But don't go anywhere because we have another segment coming up. Definitely more of a positive light and good things for the future for this Notre Dame football program. But before we get to that segment, be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast with your friends and family. And, of course, the best way to support us and what we do here at Irish Breakdown, make sure you go down there. You see it scrolling at the bottom to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Subscribe to the message boards. There's awesome content there, awesome football conversations going on every single day, what feels like every single hour. So there's going to be some awesome content coming out over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you hit that up.